This is a James Poeartistry consultant moment. Hello, Perceptive readers. This is James, and if you have any questions about the brief statements that I'm about to make, you can ask them at buymeacoffee.com, James Poeartistry. And the reason being is, one, remember what you put into it is what you'll get out or get back. And this subject that I'm going to briefly cover uh, came up because of the simple fact God's word, you see, people have their different views about it, which we allow people time to grow and things of that nature. And yet, as I always mention, the danger at times is when people overstep or go beyond what is written and then link that with what I would say in principle, what one of the Ten Commandments was talking about, about you must not use God's name in vain. And remember, I told you what that means. It just basically means taking God's name to purposely mislead or hurt somebody. And then who gets left with the bad view in the first place because you use the person's name? Well, in that case, God. That's why his name's so maligned today. And what I'm going to share with you is I listened to about 30 minutes of about an hour discourse, which was on the college level. And even though I should probably have listened to the whole thing. So much was said in the 30 minutes. The accuracy of some of the statements boiling down to God himself is the only one who can resolve, the problems that we have with sin and imperfection, okay? And why he'll have to, sit on his throne, which we've talked about before, even on the earth, for the effects to be felt on the earth. And so he was accurate about at least those type of statements. He went into the book of Hebrews, several chapters. And the thing about it is, I wasn't even going to say anything about it. But the very chapters that he used to, help talk about prophecy and what it was pointing towards, at least, from my strong understanding of what I learned, that even though he was saying it was totally in a physical way, like even a land and a continent, which is located, you see, in the area of Israel. See, from what I understand in scriptures that I've read, that no, it was still referencing spiritual. And so he was speaking dogmatically as saying it was physical. And so, I say with strong confidence that it was spiritual. And I've related, times before from the book of Romans, how Paul was talking about, remember, here it is, Jesus went to the Jews first, because remember, that's where the seed was coming from. That's a special possession to produce the seed, which Jesus came from. And he preached to them first. And then there was another work that was going to be done. Sometimes they call the three keys of the kingdom, which were, everybody know Peter, end up getting one of the keys as well. But Paul, you see, opening the doors to the Gentiles. And so Paul was preaching a lot, mainly really to who? The people who weren't born, you see, as Jews. Even though that nation was clearly around, you see, because they had the Jewish congregation, the Hebrews. Yet Paul was continuing to explain, just like whether it's the letter of Hebrews and Romans, he was preparing their mind, giving them deeper understanding that, you know what? There's not going to be any Jew or Greek in God's eyes anymore. It's like we accept Christ, then all of us actually becomes Abraham's seed. You see, he talked about that. And so the point is, he was emphasizing too that, these new congregations that were being born, they should not be going to these, grown men and everything trying to get them circumcised and things of that nature. Because he was saying there is no physical requirement. There was a spiritual requirement and acceptance of Jesus Christ to now all become part of that kingdom arrangement that he was setting up, that spiritual arrangement, which some people call the way, some people call Christians. But that still is not the reason why I'm actually bringing out this clarification. And there's other scriptures that go into it, but that's what I mean. If you want to get specific, if you heard the talk and you wanted to ask a specific verse or what have you, you can go to buymeacoffee.com, jamespoeartistry, because that's not really still the scope of why I'm bringing this up. I'm bringing this up because, as I mentioned earlier, about not using God's name in vain. And I'm saying this respectfully. I've seen so much in this world how scriptures being misunderstood or taking the wrong spirit of it used to hurt other people. You see, because I'm going to go ahead and state one of the false teachings, because in this discourse, he actually mentioned a couple of times, a couple of my beliefs, really, that he called false, which I already gave you, the one about the spiritual Israel and things of that nature. But placing that aside, one of the false teachings, this is what I want to get, I'm getting on my soapbox now, is this continuing to bring up that the Jews in that locality of land, Israel, is still deserving of some type of harsh purgatory, maltreatment, mistreatment, placed into destitution and everything else because of what they, as they would put it, did to Jesus, or because of what many of them have done down through the ages, being of, maybe, as John would put it, someone being the synagogue of Satan. Remember, you're still dealing with individuals who have formed into groups. So what am I telling you? The same way you still have bad people all over the place, all over the world, you also have what? People who are spiritual minded, people who are also followers of Christ. And did you know they got followers of Christ right over there in that nation, that land, that locality of Israel? Did you know that? Yes, they do. So the whole point is that if you want to use the word conversion, if you will, or what have you, the effect of preaching the good news, persons now realizing that they don't even have to be of a physical heritage or offspring or what have you of the Jewish nation to be still accepted and viewed as God's sons, and in the future God's children as well. You see, there were prophecies that he was bringing out, and some of those prophecies they was mentioned, I think, in Zechariah. I think he didn't reference Daniel, but it made me think about Daniel. because it was all linked in that some of those prophecies actually were already fulfilled. They've already been fulfilled. And if somebody want to talk about a punishment, well, the last vestige, if you will, of just how bad the Hebrew nation who have rejected God and rejected Jesus, as the Messiah, wherever at that time, you see, if you want to say a nation as a whole, even though already there was followers, just was waiting for Jesus to pour out his spirit on them. All the same, if you want to get the last vestige of that, if you're talking about somebody had to pay, well, you know what? They did pay for it. They paid for it back in 70 CE when the Roman armies went on ahead and just, ransacked that nation, the temple, and everything else. That was it. That was it. There is no future date. There's no future date where you can single out saying, we need to do this because according to what my instructor said over here or what have you, they need to pay, and actually maneuver the people's minds around and say, that's right, yep, get it. We're going to go ransack that. Sounding all like Hitler and his brown shirts or whatever they called them back then. And I want to tell you something that I did learn. It took all these years for somebody to say this, for it actually to hit my mind in such a way. It was one of those things that I knew, and yet it never hit me in this way before that I want to tell you. And it was this. You know how I told you I get on my soapbox and I keep on talking about they did that to the Jews, and they, and I've talked about that and concentration camps, stuff like that. And then, somebody just sent a reminder again that it was wartime. It wasn't like anybody could just really just drop in, you see, and rectify anything by any means, because already the nations were at war with one another anyway. And that was part of the evil or wickedness that, the Nazi party was doing under, that umbrella of war. So it was like nobody could really go in and do anything because they were already being blocked and fighting at the boundaries and stuff. You see what I'm saying? So it was just by that person remind me, it was wartime, you see. So it's like all people could do was just say something, but it's not like anything they were saying really was going to have any effect on that that wicked man. There was one religious leader that did tell him that he was going to be struck down by God. Well, it happened in an interesting way. So the whole point is, I wanted to make clear to you that, yes, there's prophecies that talks about, you see, Israel and stuff, but all that really still is focusing on people who are accepting that Jesus, you see, will play the role totally, you see, over the earth, and then the ones who won't, you see, then the ones who won't. So that is applying to everybody. And so really, no, there's no rapture, if you will, that some people are expecting. And I'm telling you that, not in the way that you think it is anyway, not in the way that you think it is, but to think that when some of these people, like I told you, demon-inspired get to feeling too good with themselves. Remember I told you, or Ralph for one, and they start continue to take things that they had no business taking, that they're having no business taking. Remember I talked about usurping the headship. You usurp somebody's headship, you're still usurping their worship as well. You're usurping their ability to exercise their conscience. See, it's amazing. It's really amazing how people now look at you just trying to apply the scripture to mind your own business, to also take care of your own family first. See, all this is scriptural. And you be at peace with your neighbor. They make it seem like you something is wrong with you, that you're arrogant, that you're prideful. And it's almost like, no, I'm doing what God told me to do, you see, and telling all of us to do. We're not supposed to usurp anybody else's means of living. You are supposed to literally address in a way of contracts and communication. And this, sometimes thinking too much of ourselves, as Paul talking about, has really put people in this royalty type of mindset that they ain't really got no business being in. It's almost like, no, you better look at yourself as just your brother or sister of humanity as well. You know, it's one thing for, kings of the land to get their due, but you just got a lot of individuals that no, they're nowhere near in that. But boy, I'm telling you, they're taking liberties and trying to do stuff to people and condemn people and stuff on levels that's almost like, you know what, you haven't been given that authority. You haven't even been given the right type of training or proper training, if you even wanted it at all, on how you need to properly view people and treat people. You see? So that's all I'm going to say. And as I mentioned, if you wanted to get specific with certain scriptures, it's buymeacoffee.com, jamespoeartistry. But no, remember, you don't have to do anything to yourself physically or what have you to say you're a Jew or become adopted or what have you. God does all of that, and seeing at the same time, like Paul was saying, that there's no partiality with God. There's and there's no more of this after 70 CE. All that physical aspect of things or whatever. God was like, okay, I'm done with this. See, we're now in the time period that it does talk about in Ezekiel, where God said days were coming, you see, where again, the father is not going to suffer for the sins of the son, or the son's not going to suffer for the sins of the father. You see what I'm saying? So no, it's none of this generational curses stuff that people like to hold on to as well, which is another, since somebody want to say something about false teachings, let me tell you, that's another false teaching, just to continue to hold people in bondage for third and fourth generations and stealing their inheritances. Take care. I hope you have benefited from this reading of the Holy Scriptures, also known as the Good Book and the Holy Bible, whose author is Jehovah God.